Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with you for the 176th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. There we go. Got it fast. Like the FedEx guy. We are thrilled to be joined by, what do we got here? We got 23 people in the room, and all of you on YouTube and all of you on PRN. Great to be with you. In these interesting times, we have many crises to discuss. Today, we're going to start with a brief report on the attack on trans people around the country. I've also been reading astounding stuff about abortion in Ohio and elsewhere, where these state legislatures refuse to abide by popular referenda. It's really astounding. But we're going to get a report from BRYNN TANNEHILL on the trans community. Then we're going to, which will be brief, and then we're going to go to VINNIE DeStefano, our man with Julian Assange. There are big doings this week with Julian that we really need to plug into, and Vinny's going to give us the rundown on that. We're then going to go back and discuss the rise of the labor movement. We've had some major, nobody's paying attention to this, but we've had major victories for the labor union movement for the first time in decades, and it's really, really critical that the organized labor movement move ahead. And then we're going to also talk about the campus demonstrations, and then and which will be open mic. Basically, we want everybody to chime in on all that stuff. We have incredible energy stuff going on in California, which we'll talk about in the second hour. We've got Ron Leonard with us, the great pioneer of renewables, but in the second hour, we're going to be joined by John Brakey and Republican Senator from Arizona, Ken Bennett. There are astounding things going on with election protection in Arizona that really are going to affect the whole country. So this is a very big deal. We're going to start that at 6 Eastern Time, 3 Pacific, and give John and Ken, Senator Ken, a major piece of time, because this is the nitty-gritty detail that, in fact, these calls were founded to deal with. And by the way, this is we're going into our 5th year now. We have been doing GREEP for 4 years as of April, and we started in 2020 and to deal with the election of that year, and had a decent outcome. And so we're moving into year number 5 here in May. And so in the second hour, we're really going to do a deep dive on the details of what's going on in Arizona, because John Brakey, with Ken Bennett, the Republican senator in Arizona, have done the pioneer work here, which actually may well have decided the 2020 election. They kept Arizona from being flipped in a very, very dangerous way, along with some other stuff. So second hour will be election protection issues. First hour, trans issues. Then Vinnie DeStefano with Julian Assange, unions, and the campus upheavals. All right, BRYNN TANNEHILL, you are a great author, well known all over the world, real pioneer in trans issues, among others. Can you give us a 5-minute rundown on what's going on with trans issues here in the midst of all this incredible turmoil and the march of the right against the public will?
So what's going on right now is states are continuing to look at bills affecting trans people. Here's the good part, is that most of them are failing. Some of them are going down. In Kansas, there was going to be a ban on healthcare for trans youth. The governor vetoed it. And then one Republican...
Wait, I want to linger on that for a minute. The governor of Kansas vetoed an attack against trans people. That should be up in lights.
That's not the surprising part. The surprising part is that one Republican senator in Kansas, they could have overridden the veto. They had the numbers, but one senator flipped and upheld the veto, saying that it was his view that this was significant government overreach to affect a handful of kids and get tied up in court. And medical decisions should be left up to parents. And
do you have the name of that senator?
I would have to come up with it, but
okay,
yes, we can. That's
fantastic. That is a monumental way to start our call is that a Republican senator in Kansas upheld the veto of the governor of Kansas against an anti-trans bill. That's phenomenal, Bryn. I'm really happy to hear that.
So the Biden administration has also basically come out and said it is their legal position that Title IX applies to transgender students, that you cannot exclude transgender students from athletics from kindergarten through senior year of college, essentially, or through college eligibility. There's 10 states now that are suing the government to overturn this and challenge this in court. We're going to see where this goes. This adds to the list of major trans cases that are going to end up before the Supreme Court. They're going to hear about, they're probably this fall going to grant cert to cases involving healthcare for trans youth and whether it can be banned. Because right now we've got several circuit court splits on the matter, including here in Virginia in the Fourth Circuit and in the Ninth Circuit, but you've got the 6th, 11th, and 5th saying that you can't uphold these bans. So I'm not particularly optimistic about that with this court. We've talked about in the past what's in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership. It has talked about how their overarching plan for trans people is to remove any reference of trans people from government, to codify within federal regulations that there's only 2 genders, which would mean and that it's assigned at birth, meaning that anybody that has a passport has changed their passport gender marker or their social security gender marker is going to have it change it back. That's going to cause all kinds of havoc, particularly with people who are still working or people who need to travel. So that's one of those big things. I've talked about in the past how that their goal is to make they regard anything related to being transgender as pornographic. So we're having an extremely pornographic conversation right now because I'm trans. I did pornography in public today when I took my dog for a walk wearing this clothing. But all silliness aside, they want to make
one thing. Let me jump in here. The Comstock law. The Comstock law has come into this. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
So Comstock, it basically bans the interstate commerce of pornography or abortifacients. So this can affect transgender people, like you would consider like the Trevor Project. Is that sending pornography to children state to state, even though the Trevor Project is a program to prevent LGBT youth suicide, right? One of the other things that's gotten less attention, that's buried in the policy, is former President Trump's Agenda 47, which is a series of policy documents on his campaign website. And one of the more they want to ban healthcare for trans youth. They want to ban trans people from athletics. They want to ban trans people from the military. These are all kind of things that are out in the open. The really interesting one picks up where the Cass review left off, which it says that they want to have the FDA start a review to determine whether or not hormones and transgender ideology make people depressed, aggressive, and violent. With obviously the goal is to have the FDA ban the use of hormones or treatments for transgender people that is off-label use of hormones, because almost all trans medicine is off-label because there's no money in running huge studies on generic drugs on adults. There's no money in it for a small number of adults. So those are kind of the big policy things that are going down that we're kind of looking at as being on the table in the 2024 election. You can see that there are some policy differences here. What's really, really interesting is that for one group, this is very much part of their overall messaging, that it's an election issue that they want to emphasize. Other side of the House would really, really prefer not to. That's one of the reasons why California has a ballot initiative that goes after trans youth, because polling data suggests that people really aren't in favor of letting trans kids play sports or get access to transition-related care, that they're not particularly in favor of teachers hiding from parents if their kids come out as trans. Even if the kid goes home and gets found out as trans, they're end up homeless or beaten potentially, right? so right now in California, they are gathering ballot initiatives for kind of an omnibus anti-transgender ballot initiative that would come to law in California that would do quite a few things. Like I mentioned, no more healthcare for trans youth, no more punish teachers who don't out students, bathroom bans. It's basically a whole list of things that would affect trans youth in California. And the hope is that this is unpopular enough, that trans issues are unpopular enough with the general public that they can help get better turnout in the election for their side, and make headway against the legislature where there's absolutely, in California, the legislature is relatively pro-trans. So they're hoping to try and bypass the legislature via the public sentiment. Whether or not the California public sides with them, despite the polling, is to be seen. We don't know how this is going to turn out. The good news from my perspective is that they need over 500,000 signatures by May 28th. Last I checked on April 23rd, they only had about 200,000.
Wow. Brynn, that is fantastic. Micah Hirsch, you've been putting some stuff in the chat. You want to pipe in real quick to enhance Brynn's talk? Very, very powerful, Brynn. Thank you.
Welcome.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Sluggo. Yeah, Brynn is absolutely correct, 100%. And I just wanted to add a little bit of background. The trans sports bans have been shown to be arbitrary, unfair, and unnecessary. Studies have shown that after trans girls and women undergo the treatment to transition, they lose any advantage they may have had and may actually be at a disadvantage in sports. So it's just punitive, it's just bigotry and ignorance. Also, leaked emails have shown that after gay marriage or marriage equality, which is basically what it should be called, because everybody should have the right to marry who they choose, provided they're adults. And that statement would frustrate Republicans who support child marriage, of all things, with very young girls being abused and forced into abusive relationships with much older men. So this has nothing to do with protecting children, especially nothing to do with protecting girls. The people who are pushing this have no interest in protecting anyone. This is just a political strategy that they came up with, because after marriage equality became established and the outrage that they expected to happen didn't happen, because most people mind their own business and don't care who marries who, as long as they don't, abuse the children. They pivoted and said, well, there are very few trans people, maybe 1%, 2%, 3% of the population. It's hard to really know.
Lower. 0.5
Yeah.
or 0.6%.
Yeah, and a lot of people may or may not be trans, but they're coming out more often than in the past because there's been more acceptance. Although, as Brynn reported, a lot of states and a lot of people are harping up the moral panic. And leaked emails show that this is all a cynical strategy to try to capture bigotry and focus hatred on a small minority that is really just minding their own business, that is most likely to be abused and attacked of any demographic. Although, as Brynn mentioned, the number of trans people is so small, it's really even hard to tell. But we can see how many trans people have been discriminated in housing, in employment, in every possible way. Trans children have been bullied into suicide, have been physically attacked, have been stabbed by people who have been riled up by this moral panic. And I just want to say very, very clearly that this is all the most dirty politics, and it's manipulative, and getting these things on the ballot. It reminds me a lot of 2004, when a certain party worked really hard to put a ban of marriage equality on the ballot in Ohio and used that to gin up support from evangelicals who were kind of lukewarm on
Right.
the presidential candidate. And that kept the election close enough for them to steal it. And it's happening again. And the rhetoric is all rehashed homophobia. It's almost word for word the same language, scare tactics about gay people grooming and recruiting children. And it's really shameful that a lot of people haven't learned from that and haven't reacted with outrage at this manipulation.
I laugh because Perry Kendall has put in the chat, if the radical wrong, I've never heard it referred to, but that's great. The radical wrong can put children to work in meat packing plants. What's their beef? Absolutely. I also want to, there has been really a sea change in terms of marriage equality. And I'm reminded of Robin Williams' famous saying that it's impossible to ban same-sex marriage because once you're married, it's always the same sex. Sorry about that. I had to put that in. Anyway.
And the other line in Sluggo is that people would say, I support gay marriage. Why should they get away from suffering like all the straights do?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Brynn, your excellent report. Is there anything else you want to add? I know you're real busy.
So I would just point out that polling data on trans athletes is actually very, very bad for trans people. It is, in fact, something where people don't look much further because they don't want to. They just see this one individual winning, Leah Thomas, or they see a trans Olympian. What they don't see is the data that shows that out of 40,000 female Olympic athletes since 2004, when trans people were first allowed to compete, there have been precisely 2 transgender women competed in the Olympics, and they finished dead last and 37th out of 42 respectively. If you look at representation of trans people in sports, they are underrepresented. So if they have this massive competitive advantage, why aren't there lots of them, right? If they were just as good as everybody else, you would expect 0.5% of female athletes to be trans. It's not, it's more like 0.05, right? Or 0.05%. It's like 10 times less than you would expect. Very, very small percentage. So, whatever advantages there might be aren't translating into winning a lot or being overrepresented at the highest levels. It's left out that Leah Thomas is a one-off, but this is being turned into an election issue because it generates lots of outrage because nobody really wants to do math and go, well, what's the statistical probability if you have this many athletes and this many in the sample size? But when you actually do the statistical analysis, the notion that trans people are going to somehow take over women's sports or destroy them just isn't supported by the numbers. Statistical analysis doesn't hold up the argument. One other thing I'd point out is that the other thing is that these bans do have an effect on trans people in a country where obesity, diabetes, and metabolic diseases are rampant compared to the rest of the industrialized world. Trans kids are less than 1/3 as likely to participate in sports as their peers.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Brynn. We really appreciate that. And a great report. Thank you, Mike Hirsch. Let's move on now to the issue of Julian Assange. Wendy, you had a hand up, and then we're going to talk about Julian Assange. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much. This isn't, I raised my hand for something else, but I do want to just make a quick point to that. And I've discussed this with Mike before. I think the issue with the sports thing, I think probably comes down to more of like the competitive sports. Like if I have a younger sister or a daughter that is training with someone who might have a different body mass. So I don't want to go into that, but there's a lot of issues, but I fully support the trans community 100%.
Okay.
But I do think sports issue has a lot of nuances to it that are of concern. What I did want to raise was that I found out recently, just through my own research randomly, I didn't find an article on this, which is shocking, but there were over 500,000 women raped between the time that Dobbs happened in 2022 to January of this year. And the FBI suspects that only about 1/3 of rapes are reported. So this is 500,000 reported rapes of women in a year and a half. So you can assume that's double or triple. I'm thinking, just planting the thought seed for further discussion on what those numbers are for trans women. when we're having this massive epidemic of
Right.
women that are raped. I mean, this dark underbelly. So thank you for being with us,
Sure.
Brynn. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bryn. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Wendy.
I will tell
I
you.
want to mention, I was shocked. Is this Nancy Parco speaking here? No?
Slug, oh,
That's
no,
Brynn.
Brynn wants to make a
Oh,
comment.
Brynn, go ahead.
I got to log off, but I'll tell you the data. There is almost certainly data right now in the National Transgender Discrimination Survey of over 90,000 transgender individuals. There is a lot of data in there. I'll dig into it and find out and report back to Mike.
I must say, as a sidebar, thank you for that,
You're welcome.
Bryn. I've been watching Franklin on Netflix. It's pretty good, although Michael Douglas is not Ben Franklin. But anyway, it's sort of like Michael Douglas going to Paris and getting the French into the revolution. But there was a major scene in Franklin, allegedly taking place in the 1770s and 80s, involving a trans issue. I was astounded to see this. So anybody who's interested, the most recent, it's on Netflix. I think, or maybe it's Apple Plus. One of those things. The most recent episode of Franklin had a very interesting episode involving trans issues that you may be interested in. Okay, we have 50 people with us. We are going to go now to Julian Assange with Vinnie DeStefano. Thank you again, Bryn. Thank you, Mike. Vinnie, there are things that, I also, Ray McClendon, it's great to have Ray McClendon with us. And Ray, I'm going to tell you in the second hour, we're going to do a really deep dive on election issues. We're going to start with Arizona, but if you can stay through 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'll call on you first to give us an update from Georgia. John Brakey, who's on the call, is going to be with the great Ken Bennett, this Republican senator, and any updates you could have on Georgia would fit in just right. Okay, John, I'm sure you're good with that. So Vinnie DeStefano and Ray, thank you for your continuing great work in Georgia, which continues to be in turmoil, and can't even begin to describe it. Vinnie DeStefano, what now this week can people do for Julian Assange?
Well, I'd like to open before I get to that with a quote, and it's an old quote. It says, "The security of the nation is not at the ramparts alone. Security also lies in the value of our free institutions, a cantankerous press, an obstinate press, a ubiquitous press that must be suffered by those in authority in order to preserve the great values of freedom of expression and the right of the people to know." Now, that quote is 53 years old. Those are the words of Judge Murray Gerfine. He was a Richard Nixon appointee who had been on the bench for a total of 2 months when he was faced with one of the most important cases in our history, second only to Julian's case, and that was the Pentagon Papers case. And I think that is the crux of the issue right here, the public's right to know. And to protect that public's right to know, what Assange Defense is calling on all of our activists to do is every week to make 6 calls, 1 to your own congressman, and then we will pick the 5 congressmen you choose to. I will put those congressmen in the chat here very shortly. I did so earlier, but I'll make it easier for you. And House Resolution 934, it's important you mention House Resolution, is expressing the sense of the House of Representatives that regular journalistic activities are protected under the First Amendment. The United States ought to drop all charges against and attempts to extradite Julian Assange. At this point, there are currently 10 co-signers to this bill. Most of them, I'd say 60% of them, are Republicans. Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and Pramila Jayapal, Ilhan Omar have signed on. But where are the rest of the Democrats? This is a protection of the public's right to know. And so I am going to put this right in the chat right now so you can have it and you can call. As I said, you call your own congressman, but that you call these 5 congressmen.
Vinnie, you froze up on us. Vinnie, are you there? They took you away. Vinnie DeStefano. Okay, let's see. What do you got up there? Can you put it up on the screen again, Steve? I will say while Vinnie's frozen that I was kind of PO'd. I think we can say that, to see Joe Biden on the correspondence dinner, which is always, kind of uproarious and funny and all that stuff with all the correspondence. And he's making these great pronouncements about the power of the media, the press, and the need, to quote Jefferson's choice, if you have a choice between government and newspapers, you take the newspapers, but never mention Assange. I mean, total hypocrisy there, that you got a room full of people who could be persecuted, just like Julian Assange, and you don't mention him. I'll also say that I actually like Colin Jost, the guy from Saturday Night Live, but he was really not the right guy to be at the correspondence dinner. I think Scarlett Johansson would have been a lot better, actually. All right, we're welcoming Vinnie back into the room here. John Brakey, is Ken Bennett going to join us at 6, or is he on now? John Brakey, let me unmute you here.
Yeah, he's going to join us a few minutes before 3 o'clock.
Oh, okay. All right, then. Okay, because we have Ray McClendon with us. Maybe we'll go to Ray early and get a report.
Okay.
I got back on.
You're back. Okay.
I don't know what the heck happened. I was trying to post the.
Never do. So what is the nature of the bill that is?
The bill is designed to halt the extradition of Julian Assange to protect freedom of the press, because as Judge Gerfine said 53 years ago, this is really not about Julian. This is about preventing the people of the United States to know what its government is doing in its name. The reason he's being prosecuted is not because he harmed anybody and not because he told lies, but principally because he told the truth about the war crimes committed in our names and our tax dollars, as is the case in Gaza, as is the case in Ukraine, as is the case in so many other places. In this case, it was the Iraq war logs and the Afghan war logs that he released that showed that the American government was lying to its own citizens about what was happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, the inordinately high civilian casualty rates, which the United States government lied about, the war crimes committed by our troops, which our government lied about. And as Thomas Jefferson said, the necessary predicate for a functioning democracy is a informed and educated electorate. And without a robust, free, ubiquitous, and cantankerous press, you're not going to get that. And so that is why it is so epically important, irrespective of what you may think you know about Julian or the case or anything else. This is really about your right as a citizen to know what your government is doing. And House Resolution 934 is simply calling for the extradition to be dropped to protect journalists around the country.
So this is you want people to do what?
What I want people to.
Oh, he froze again.
Listen, Harvey, I've got it. He's asking that we call representatives and ask them to sign on to House Resolution 934.
And the text has been put in a chat, so if you want to reference that, you can find your reps at US Rep site and put your zip code in if you want to email them too. But he's calling for people to call their representatives and a certain list of representatives.
And specifically to target Summer Lee and Mark Pocan and Barbara Lee and Matthew Rosendale, because it seems that was Vinnie saying that it's mostly Republicans who have signed on to this, and it really should be bipartisan.
That's amazing. That I know we have that extreme right-wing guy, Paul Gosar, who has supported this. Life is full of surprises, and there we go. David Guran, did you want to jump in on this, David Guran? We haven't heard from you. I'm trying to unmute you here. At any rate.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, are there any senators in support of it, like Bernie Sanders? I know it's a House bill, but eventually needs to go to the Senate.
Yes. Has Bernie Sanders been contacted on this? Has he come forward on this? Vinnie or Wendy, do you know if Bernie has been contacted on the Julian Assange case?
I don't think that Vinnie's here, so I'm going to go ahead and speak. I'm sure Vinnie's so completely thorough in the campaign, so I'm sure that they've been in contact. I can read you right now the list of people who have signed on. I know that Jim McGovern is one of the co-sponsors. Oh, here's Vinnie. I'll quickly tell you the list of people. And so we have Paul Gosar, Ilhan Omar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Anna Luna, Eric Burleson, Jeff Duncan.
Wait. Marjorie Taylor Greene
Marjorie Taylor
Yeah.
Greene.
has signed on to this?
Yes.
You're kidding.
And Paul Gosar wrote it. Now, look, this is important to understand. This is not a left or a right or Republican or Democratic issue. This is an issue about defending the First Amendment to the Constitution. And look, I'll be honest, I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't like Paul Gosar. But even the
thought you
stop
used to
clock
go out
tells
with
the
Marjorie.
correct time twice a day. And they're right on this. And the unfortunate thing is that the Democratic Party, the Biden administration, is following through on the Trump administration's prosecution. And to what end, I do not know. I do not know why they are pursuing this case when the Obama administration correctly diagnosed it as the New York Times problem. Once Julian is successfully prosecuted with this case, any government, anywhere on the planet, could go after any journalist for printing truthful information they find uncomfortable and haul them off to their own country to stand trial. That's what this is about. This is perhaps the most important case, First Amendment case in our lives. And, why we haven't got Democratic support right now, it baffles me. It absolutely baffles me.
It is amazing. It's truly amazing. I don't want to get arcane here, but I have actually read the proceedings of the of the Zenger case from the 1700s, where it was established. This guy Zenger had a newspaper. He printed stuff that may or may not have been true about the governor of New York, the royal governor, whose happens name it was William Cosby, and Cosby sued him and they prosecuted him, and somehow because his wife Anna kept the paper going, they summoned a mob and surrounded the courthouse and got a decent jury appointed. And as a result of that, the jury ruled, it took them 10 minutes to rule that truth was a defense in a libel case, and that you could, in fact, be protected if you printed the truth. And that Zenger case is the root of the First Amendment and the freedom of the press and the whole deal. And actually, Ben Franklin was in the room. He was not a participant, but he came up from Philadelphia to be in the courtroom for that trial. So anybody wants to talk about the Assange case, you can refer all the way back 3 centuries to the Zenger case. That was really a first in the British Empire. We were part of the British Empire at the time, and nobody in England would have dared to vote that truth is a defense in attacking in criticizing a royal governor. So there you go. The roots of this
Harvey, every time I've tried to post the action that we have for people to take advantage of, that's what keeps kicking me off the Zoom call. So I do apologize to everyone for that. Steve,
Okay.
If you could do me a favor, go way back up to the beginning of the chat, copy that, cut it,
I've done that
paste it.
twice.
Good, thank you.
Yes,
And the list of reps.
in the chat here, Patricia Gratian has pointed out that Hillary Clinton really hates Julian Assange.
Yeah.
And she would like him right with bin Laden there. So
The third way Democrats have a tendency to hate him because rather than looking in the mirror and seeing the blame for the loss of Hillary's election, they're looking for an excuse somewhere else. And Julian Assange had convenient excuses. He had about as much to do with Hillary's defeat as I did. Of course, I
well,
didn't
you were
vote for
instrumental
her.
in defeating her. So what can I tell you?
No,
But,
exactly.
yes, Hillary
You
lost
going to
because she refused to campaign in Wisconsin and
Wisconsin
Michigan,
and Michigan.
and she refused to challenge the vote count in Wisconsin, Michigan, and
Not only
Pennsylvania.
that, but one of the things that Julian did point out is in the release of the DNC emails is that they thought, and understandably so, that Trump would be an excellent candidate for her to compete against. Who the hell was going to vote for that buffoon? And yet she lost to him. And I says, it says a great deal about the third way Democrats today.
Yes, this is a tendency. The Democratic Party, these guys, these genius, advisors, love to promote right-wing candidates.
Yeah.
And on the presumption that they'll be easier to beat. And then we wind up with them. It's like the cruise missile. Henry Kissinger pushed the cruise missile because he thought it was so insane, nobody would go for it. And then all of a sudden, everybody fell in love with the cruise missile. So, or even it's like the atomic bomb. MYLA RESON, and then Steve.
Thanks, Harvey. I was wondering, Vinnie, can you fill us in now on what's going on with Australia? I know that there was some communication from Australia to the
Yes,
Biden.
there've been communication from Australia, but the push from the Albanese government has been weak at best. There is a huge, huge military deal called the AUKUS deal, which allowed the United States to park nuclear-armed submarines and create an alliance in that area against a hegemon against China. And you'd think that that would give Australia a lot of opportunity to push back against the United States. You want your submarines here? Free our citizen. But the response from Albanese, he's a bit like Obama in that when he goes to negotiate, he moves the goalpost so close to the other side that it's almost pointless to negotiate. Now, there is supposed to be a deal, but we haven't heard anything about that yet. The other thing is on May 20th, the resolution, we're supposed to hear back from the three exceptions to the extradition that were allowed to go through, and the United States was able to provide three, but actually two assurances to the British government that Julian Assange would not be put to death and that would be allowed access to the First Amendment rights in his case in the Eastern District Court of Virginia. However, those assurances are not worth the paper they're printed on. First and foremost, because if he comes back, they only apply to the current charges. He will most assuredly, if he's brought back here, be charged for the Vault 7 releases, the most embarrassing in CIA's history, and he could face the death penalty for that. And they go, well, we didn't do it on one, but we did on the other, so we gave good assurances. And the other is...
Vinnie,
yes?
would you just remind us what the Vault 7 releases are? I know you
The Vault 7, you can't make this stuff up. What the CIA and the NSA had developed was ways to take our smart technology, our Alexa, our Siris, our smart refrigerators, our smart TVs, and turn them into listening devices, warrantless listening devices that would listen to every conversation you had in the privacy of your home. And of course, letting that cat out of the bag was incredibly embarrassing to the Pompeo CIA, and they went after him with everything they had. Now, to go back to the assurances, they assured Julian that he could, at trial, request First Amendment protection. That's the assurance. They could just as easily say, well, no, we won't give it to you. That's to use a Watergate term, a non-assurance assurance. So if you talk to Daniel Hale, who was provided the same kind of assurances in the Eastern District Court of Virginia in his trial, he was a whistleblower that highlighted the inordinately high civilian death toll and that surgical drone program that Obama put into place. Well, his assurances from the judge at his trial were not worth a penny, because when they went to sentence him, everything that he was promised turned out to be exactly the opposite. He was put in a supermax under the harshest conditions and provided none of the psychiatric care that he required for his PTSD that he suffered in killing people from here in the United States with the drone program. Harvey, you're muted.
There we go. Steve Caruso.
Yeah. Well, case in point, freedom of speech. Al Jazeera is now banned from Israel under order today. And how many journalists got killed? It's like 120, 180. I don't know what during this war. And the whole thing with war is that the fog is non-existent. We all see what's going on.
Stephen, and you couldn't have said something more important. We just celebrated on May 3rd World Press Freedom Day, and the hypocrisy in D.C., where they were obviously, and I think rightfully, calling for the release of Evan Gershkovich. There was not a word about the journalists in Gaza that are being targeted by the IDF forces, not a word about Shireen Akila Abdullah, who was shot by IDF forces in Jenin. Excuse me for butchering her name. And not a word about Julian Assange, the greatest threat to freedom of the press. So the hypocrisy in the Biden administration knows zero bound.
And we also have, of course, had Steve Donziger on with us, and there are the questions of Leonard Peltier and Maria. Let's just hope that this administration, by the force of the upcoming election, will swing and finally do the right thing here.
Well, Harvey, I want to thank you for allowing me to come on here so often and bloviate as I do, because it is only through the collective voices of citizens, not our congressmen, not our senators, and to go back, Bernie Sanders, to his eternal shame, and I knocked on doors for this guy, I contributed money to his campaign, has been abysmally silent on Julian Assange. And so expecting anything in the Senate, anything in the Congress, I think is a fool's game. I think what we need to do is to raise our voices as loudly as we can to force them to understand that this is a threat to the Constitution. Every one of our congressmen and senators, elected officials, swore an oath to defend the Constitution. This case is an assault, a dagger at the heart of the First.
Absolutely. All right, very well stated. And again, you want people to call senators and congresspeople, support House Resolution 934.
Yes.
House Resolution, what is it?
This is a House resolution. It's a non-binding resolution. So look, it's not even causing a great kerfuffle with people that sign in it, but the cowardice that is in being exhibited, particularly in the Democratic aisles of the Congress, is appalling to a degree that I couldn't believe. So, but I think if enough of them call, we send postcards, the calls, keep them coming. Every week, if you go to Assange Defense, there'll be another 5 individuals to call until May 20th when we hear the resolution of this case. And again, Harvey, thank you to giving us an opportunity to bring this case to the public.
Well, as a card-carrying journalist, this does kind of strike home. I do want to. People should emphasize to the Democrats that this is probably the only chance they'll ever get to co-sign a resolution with both Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, who could pass up such an opportunity, for God's sakes? So, you got any other extreme, right? What about Mike Johnson? Has he signed on to this, the Speaker of the House?
No, he's too busy worrying about Armageddon, bringing it forward.
Well, somebody's got to be around to cover it. Okay, thank you for that, Vinnie.
Thank you, Harvey.
Wonderful. I do want to emphasize we're going to have Ray McClendon join John Brakey and Republican Senator Ken Bennett at the top of the hour. I did want to jump in. We have had something we haven't heard for years, so many years in this country, is a revival of the labor movement. I mean, God help us, this has not been happening in our country, which is one of the reasons I believe for the crazy spiraling down into right-wing sentiment all over the country. But the importance of labor unions in maintaining democracy is absolutely at the center of everything. The first people that Hitler went after were not Jews, were not gays, Jehovah's Witnesses. It was, in fact, the unions. Hitler realized that if he was going to wipe out democracy in Germany, even the last vestiges, he had to wipe out the labor union. So what's happened now is that a major strike has been won, or union recognition at an auto factory in the South. And everybody's, whatever press it's getting behind everything else, is really, it's a big deal. And we did want to have some folks from the actual union movement on who could speak to this. Anybody want to raise their hand and talk to it? But we will, in the future calls, have more attention paid to the union movement, which has been on its heels, since the 60s, really, or at least the 70s. And now we have reason for optimism. MYLA, did you want to jump in on this? And then we're going to talk about the campus appeals. MYLA, reason?
Yes, thank you so much, Harvey. I just wanted to make a quick announcement. You are going to be interviewed tonight by the extraordinarily creative man known as the letter hack, Mark Strackbein. He's going to be drawing you and interviewing you on his YouTube channel. The Letter Hack is the YouTube channel, and I'm hoping that people will tune in and watch the live stream as he draws you. He drew, by the way, he drew the cartoon behind me, Cartoon Me. And he is just an amazing creative force, and I'm really looking forward. There it is. I'm looking forward to the interview. That's the letter hack on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the chat.
Well, thank you. Well, if he's going to draw me, I guess I'll have to keep my teeth in.
9:30 Eastern.
Okay.
So
All right.
thank
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's talk now, and we are going to have more on the union movement. Let's talk now about what's going on the campuses. Wendy, did you want to say something before we jump in this? And then top of the hour, which is only 13 minutes away, we're going to do election protection.
Thank you. It's nothing major. I just thought I would give a little quib about the labor movement since I know you did want to talk about it. So sure. Yeah, I mean, if everybody like Harvey just elucidated, like there was the rise of the auto workers and the UPS workers. Nobody realized like and nobody realized like how bad their conditions actually are. And I think social media probably has a much larger role than we're realizing, because people are like, just, I mean, I don't even have to explain the exponential effect that has. And then you have Chris Smalls organizing for Amazon. Somebody just put that in the chat. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. But you have the youth. Like I worked in restaurants and bars for over 25 years, and it just wasn't even a thought. Like it's not even like a possibility. And now people are becoming more educated that it's possible to unionize. And then I think another huge impact, like our reason is the cost of living. Like right now, you can't just work a job and survive. Nobody can. And you have an entire, like multiple generations that are not going to see retirement. Like every day is a struggle for survival. So people are like looking for ways because they're being shaken out of their comfort zones and they can't take care of their families. So unions, like they're the non-political way to affect policy. And it's finally catching on as this incredible mechanism that people don't realize that they have the power to take hold of the control of being in kind of basically a feudalist society. So we'll definitely, I have some people that will be able to come on in the future to talk more, but the UPS workers, the auto workers, the steel workers, and worker safety, what happened in Ohio, all of these things are finally contributing to the largest probably population of voters in the country. And so I thank you, Harvey, for wanting to talk about this, because the working class is.
Well, the most recent major victory has been at UAW in Tennessee, and you know that, and it is a huge deal. What I can't understand is what's happened to the postals, and I want to get somebody at a future date to talk about this. I'm kind of biased. I was in business with my dad for 20 years. We sold uniforms to postal workers, and I love postal workers. They are the coolest people that you could ever imagine. And well, I mean, you know, they're just the heart and soul of America. And why Biden has not gotten rid of this creep that's been destroying the postal service, this guy, DeJoy, a badly named guy, but he's been in there almost 4 years now under Biden. And his sole purpose is to destroy the postal service. And the post services has two very powerful unions, the National Association of Letter Carriers and the clerks. And he hasn't budged, this guy. And I don't know why Biden hasn't gotten him out of there. Go ahead.
They want to privatize. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they want to privatize all the carriers. So, I mean, you have the whole world is ordering online right now. You have Amazon that's making Walmart, the world's largest monopoly, look like nothing. And so now it's like, and with like the federal workers, you have to have federal protections. You have to take care of our precious postal workers. And if you privatize, then prices can skyrocket. And just like everything else, that's my reasoning, I think.
Well, it's really a nightmare. I hate to see it. You know, you now think a week to 10 days to get a letter. I mean, inside Los Angeles, you can mail a letter inside Los Angeles to another piece of Los Angeles, and it won't get there for 2 weeks. I think I once mailed a check to MYLA. It showed up like months later. I mean, you know, and to have a non-functional postal service, which was founded in the days of Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was our first postmaster general. He viewed it as the internet of the day, and it ran. The mail rain, no snow, no sleet, and the mail was delivered on time. This guy's destroyed the place, and he's still there. It's unconscionable. And it also, as you say, Wendy, you're right. They want to. Why the Democrats want to privatize the Postal Service? You have two of the most powerful unions in the country, these two postal worker unions, and they'll go. That's why they want to get rid of the public postal service. It's outrageous. Lynn and then
Yeah,
Paul.
I mean,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Wendy, real quick.
thank you. Sorry. I mean, the Democrats in office right now, I mean, they're name only, they're paid by the same people and paid off by the same forces. But you just reminded me of another point being that I read during the free speech movement about 100 years ago, almost, when it was starting, like right before the beatniks. Apparently the zip codes were put there because they wanted censor. They wanted to go through your mail and find out if you were sending like anything indecent. It was because of like McCarthyism. And so I wonder if like now is kind of a little bit of just a mode of control, because if you control the postal service, then you're controlling the way people do business, what they're dependent on, their livelihoods. It's a lot of nuances too on it. So
Yes, you're right. Okay, Lynn and Paul, and then we're almost at the top of the hour. We'll jump to Ray and John Brakey.
My comment is very short. If you recall, Biden appeared pronouncements about himself to say, I'm a capitalist. And, that's where it's at. I mean, that is why the post office and other organizations and agencies are falling apart, because Biden and et cetera want to make as much money out of them as possible, want to exploit them and then move on.
Right. And I will reiterate that the Postal Service has been at the heart of American society for, almost 300 years, since the mid 1700s, and 250 anyway. And it's outrageous and it really harms the entire society, really harms the whole country when you have a Postal Service that's not functional. Paul Newman and then Ron Leonard, and we're going to.
Yes, I just wanted to say I read this book called Sun Tzu, Art of War. And I've noticed for years, for decades, the Republicans have been using the strategy of lighting fires all over the place. And meanwhile, the Democrats are overwhelmed with things they have to focus and prioritize. And this is more of a question. Do you believe that it's quite possible that that's what's really going on? Why the Democrats and why Biden hasn't addressed the joy? Because it's low on his priority list.
It should be.
If you look at election fraud and all the other stuff.
Right. But, to have a functioning postal service has been at the core of American society for more than 2 centuries. And to have Biden come in, friend of the working class, and ignore the catastrophe at the Postal Service, it's suicidal. For the Democratic Party, it's suicidal, because the postal unions have been among the strongest force of progressive politics in this country forever. Ron Leonard and David, I think actually we're going to jump to the electoral politics. Go ahead, Ron.
So hopefully I can join the two pieces together. The first ever long distance flight of a internal combustion powered airplane was from Albany, New York to Long Island, New York. And what happened? They delivered a letter from the governor. So there is a precedent for the use of postal instant delivery and instant satisfaction. And Harvey, I think you might have noticed I sent you a little thing that you're seeing in the news. These outside agitators are somehow causing students to act up on canvases, and that's what's causing the unrest. It's outside agitators, and one of the ones they noticed was an organization started by a friend of yours and mine called Connie Hogarth. Connie Hogarth famously started Westpac in Westchester in the 1970s. And I know her personally, and she was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And it's not an outside agitation. It's a inside realization that the youth have that unless they stand up for human rights, we're all fools and we are going to be lost.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ron. David Guran, and then I think we're going to go, we'll go to John Brakey, Ray McClendon, and go ahead. Are you in a car, David? You're obviously in a car.
I stopped.
You stopped,
Just real quick,
okay.
Yep. Just real quick, as one we have corporate Democrats. They support really a lot of the same things as the Republicans. So, that's why Biden hasn't changed it. It's not that they're too busy. They're wasting a lot of time doing crap when they should be doing their job. And then in terms of the protests, Biden, he was asked if this is going to change his mind on anything. He said no. So it just shows that Biden just will not listen to the people, and that's what's been happening.
Yeah, it's
the
terrible.
last decades. Yeah.
I have a personal note on that. We made a film in the 70s about fighting the nuclear plant at Seabrook, New Hampshire. And we had a press conference where the president of Public Service, misnamed Public Service Corporation New Hampshire, which was building the Seabrook plant, said that he would never listen to anything. I would hope that those protests have no impact. Well, the guy's name was William Tallman. And within years, he went bankrupt because they didn't listen to the public. They tried to build 2 reactors at Seabrook, and they got the first one done, but the second one put him into bankruptcy. If he had listened to us, they'd be running offshore windmills now. So let's hope that Biden gets over this nonsense. Ruth Strauss, did you want to join in with us? Thank you, David. And
Sure.
Thank you for not moving in your car.
No problem.
Last thing we ever want is somebody talking in a car that's moving. I won't go into it. Anyway, Ruth, go ahead.
Oh, well, just a couple of things. I mean, I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's toes or coming in the middle. But number one, in terms of outside agitators, there have always been outside agitators. I remember, protesting in Cambridge about the Vietnam War, and the people who broke the, windows of storefronts were like, quote unquote, townies from Somerville. And I think that's the same thing that happens with the Black Lives Matters. The people who broke into stores were probably not the Black Lives Matters people. And regarding this most recent thing at UCLA, I don't know whether people have already talked about this or not, but the outside agitators were, Zionists who weren't even on camp, or, weren't part of campus life. So it's not always, outside agitators are not always the good guys, and oftentimes aren't. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is about Biden. I disagree. I mean, yes, he's on the wrong side of history on a lot of things, but I think he does listen. And what I mean by that is, finally today, he said he's not, it's late, it's terribly late, but that he's not going to, send any more, death machines.
Please catch the rest of the show at grassrootsep.org, and please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Green Grassroots Election Protection Coalition. Thanks.